I forgot what I was going to talk about. Yeah, there's nothing, absolutely, there are things. But you know, this is actually a perfect size table for a lot of reasons. One, it's a good plant stand. It's great for coffee, books, papers, magazines, whatever. But once you make your first piece of furniture, you can't stop. It's like an addiction. But to find your style is one of the key points of making a table like this. This is all poplar. This is a 125-year-old barn. It was built to house pigs. We're just outside. Well, let's see, we're in northern Chatham County in North Carolina, just south of Chapel Hill. And you'll see a lot of these red boards like this all over, you know, every barn, especially in the south. You'll see a lot of the poplar used, and it's always painted that red. It makes for an amazing piece of furniture. It's a soft wood, so it does pick up a little bit of this green color to it, which is absolutely amazing. When you put a nice coat of polyurethane, you know, I always pass on just regular urethanes. I like to use spar urethane, which gives it a little bit of UV protection. So if the furniture, the wood, whatever it is going to be inside, still use spar urethane, and I always use oil. It tends to just give a way better finish. And the great thing about it is just the ability to use either side, because you're going to see the saw marks on one side, the nail marks, and a lot of people always wonder what these dark rings are around the nail holes. Well, that's rust. That's where the nails really dig deep into the wood and start to rust, but the characteristics of it can be really cool. And these are all wormholes, which make it really cool. And can you fill them? Yes, you can. The urethane will fill them. Here's your red board here, classic barn wood, which I find this really cool because you see these marks in it, you see these lines that are in it. That's actually poison ivy that had really glued itself to the side of this barn, which is very typical in this area. And some might ask, why would you use that? Well, why not? It looks awesome. The characteristics of it, it's natural. It's just what happened to it. So I like to use a lot of stuff like this. And then you see a piece of poplar like this, which is like mind-boggling. You can really start to see a lot of reds, blues, blacks, greens, a little bit of everything. And you know, to be quite honest, I can't tell you why this particular board looks like this. I love all the divots and all the cracks. I can show you ways to completely fill this with an epoxy that would fill all these holes and make this a nice, cleanable surface, but keep the characteristics. I'm going to take my cool glasses off. Today we're going to talk about the different types of tubing, what I call square tubing, which is this. And the different sizes, pretty much basically you can get any size you want, from a rectangular tubing that's 1 inch by 2 inch, or my all-time favorite, which is 2 by 2. This is 1 by 1, and this is referred to as angle iron. And that's also available in as many sizes as you can imagine. Thicknesses, there's like a lot of commercial use with angle iron, but I use it typically to build frames to hold the wood. And I always use 16 gauge because it's perfect. It has enough meat to it. You'll see here in a little bit when you're welding. You definitely want something that's thick enough to where it just doesn't blow through when you hit it with the welder. So, and using the welder that we are going to use and that most of you are probably going to use is going to be just a simple 110. Plug it into any outlet, and we run a mixed inert gas, which is why they call it MIG welding. MIG welding to me is like the simplest way, the fastest way, the least expensive way, and the cleanest way. So I pretty much MIG weld everything, and let's do it. A mistake that you can make is if we're going 20 by 20, we're going to cut the 45s on those to make a square. You got to remember to take 2 inches off of your legs if you want it to be 20 by 20 by 20. Of course, we're going to do 4 legs. You can do 3, and 3 definitely is easier to balance. But 3-legged tables and such really never work out that well. Okay, so here we have our top, 4 legs. So what I like to do is, one thing that I'm going to tell you this, and from now on you're going to be looking for it, but tubing, any sort of steel, is going to have a seam. This is actually made from a flat piece of metal that has been folded and then seam welded. And so the seams are cool as long as you keep them in line with one another. As in, if you make a table, you got legs, the legs are visible. So on here we have the seam on the outside here also. You could, to make this as far as a pair of legs go, like this, but there's nothing in this world that drives me crazier than that. You know, because you definitely want this to have rhyme. I tend to want to put my seams together like this in the leg situation, but we're going to move these off to the side because we don't need them right now. And we're going to cut some angles on this 2x2. So here, when you're cutting your angles with the saw, it's easy to mess it up just basically by not doing this process. So the first thing that you have to think about is, where is the seam going to end up? For me, I like to see the seam on the bottom. So we're going to do all seam sides down, so you don't see the seam at all. And so this will be the top. We'll cut our angle here. And you know, you can't flip this back in and get the same cut that you need. So you simply just take it and roll it over and cut the seam side. With all the carbide saws, they do have a tendency to throw your cut, so be really careful. That's why you really want to go slow when you're cutting with it and make sure that you're not binding it. So we have everything cut, and then one thing that I like to do, to go ahead and do, the welds will be much better if you clean the ends of the material. And another great reason for using these grinders, like I said we talk about in another episode, is just the balance of the Makita grinders. They tend to be much more quiet. You know, you're using an electric motor. The battery quality is incredible. And so we're going to clean the ends where we're going to weld them. Just a little bit. All right, here we go. We're going to knock this out and then go ride bikes. A Miller 141. Pretty basic, but perfect little welder. Honestly, I do everything with this thing. Unless you're doing something more structural, thicker than a 1/4 inch, you don't really need anything like that. These are much more portable. They run on a 110 outlet. This is your ground. You definitely want to get a clean, grindable spot on here with no paint or anything. So being that this is 1/4 inch plate steel, I can attach this here without having to attach it to the table. So the ground is basically, the table is grounded at this point. So a lot of people that are learning how to weld always want to use, or people get sold on using flux core wire. And I definitely don't recommend it. It's really dirty. Basically, they powderize the gas that I'm about to hook up to, and it's on the wire itself. And we'll talk about that in a second. You can see how well the table comes together with the right equipment. Perfect angles, and we'll tack weld these, square it up, and then weld it up. So what you want to do is make sure that the table base is square. And the easiest way that I've found to do this is to basically put a tack. And a tack is just a quick little tack, something that holds it together while you get it squared up. So I like to put my tacks right in these corners. Outside corners preferred. Easier to clean than the inside corner. I'm going to put a tack. Your trick to squaring the table up, which most people probably know. So right here we've got 28.5. And here we have 24.5. Just kidding. So it's actually not exactly perfectly square. So we're going to make it square. 28 3/8 and 28 1/4. So we're not that far off. It's pretty cool. That should make it perfect. And you can see in your corners they line up really well. The other thing is you want to make sure that everything is flat. So usually what I'll do is take a rubber mallet so that I can see that this piece right here is pretty flat in there, flat. Just making sure these come together really nice. And then we're going to flip it over and get a nice little weld on the bottom here. Your leg, okay, see that we're seam side down on every single piece. This is the bottom of the table. And as far as your legs go, you want to make sure your seam side face each other. If you don't want to do it like that, that's fine too. There's many different directions that you could go here. You could weld it onto the inside like this, which I think gives it a really good look. But you also have to take in consideration that if we want to use a wood top, it's a little trickier. It'll take you a little bit longer. Maybe we'll do that in another episode. But so we're going to just go right up here on top. And you need your square. And I have a pretty interesting way of doing this. I'm going to tack this inside corner. But you want to hold down the backside because the heat will make it move. Okay, so we got a nice little tack on there. And then we're going to put our seam sides together. You'll hear me talk about that a lot, but I think it makes a lot of difference in the outcome of the table. Okay, another little tack right here. You know, it's a little bit more than a tack, just simply because if it doesn't work out, we can certainly cut it off easy, but I like to put a little heat to it to go ahead and get it where I want it. So we're going to put these seam sides to the inside on all four. I've got one here that I didn't clean. Go like this. All right. We're well on our way here. You see this hasn't taken us very long at all. It's like by the time you drive to IKEA, you could make this table. Get your little cart. Okay, so this one just needs to be pulled in ever so slightly. So this is when it gets pretty interesting. Okay, if you look on this side of the table, the leg is square. On this side of the table, it's leaning in a little bit. So if we know that this is square, then we can create sort of a pivot by welding the other side here, because we already know that's right. And then go on to this side, and then you still have the ability to move it. So you've created a pivot on the non-level side, straight side. Go back here, and then we're good there. So we can go ahead and... Now do keep in mind, like when you're welding these things, the heat definitely wants to move the material around quite a bit. So just always go back and double check yourself. It's not, do yourself a favor, fix it Don't try to just live with it. It'll drive you nuts. It doesn't take very long. I try to give people tips on how to do it and do it right. So we're going to do it right. So this one is the same way. So we're going to create the pivot over here. And if that doesn't make sense, leave us a comment and we'll try to answer that question. So, and I'm going to bump in, this one's leaning in, so we're going to go ahead and get this going on, and then in this way. Alright, so now we have all of our legs on. We need to do something that a lot of people don't do. We're going to cut caps for the tops of these real quick. I do like to hang on to a few things because they can be valuable at times. You can see here where I've cut circles out for to close up pipe. I was welding some benches that were made out of pipe. And so we're just going to move this out of the way and cut our pieces. We've already cleaned these, so we know that they're nice and clean and level and ready to be welded up. Well, we have feet on a table, so we're going to go ahead and flip this thing over. It's always my my not so favorite thing to do, which is to grind all these down. You do always want to remind yourself that this is not, we're not making this in a factory, so imperfections are there, and I truly believe that that's what makes it look like it's handmade. Now we're going to talk about putting a tabletop in here. Right now we're just going to cut our angle iron. That is going to, I'm just going to take 2 pieces of angle iron, inside one, inside over here too. Alright, so we're ready to put the wood in. That sounded weird. Okay, so you notice that it didn't weld the tops, these corners. It's unnecessary. I think it gives it a nice clean look. You can do it either way, but I really think that like this just shows the quality a little bit better. You can tell that it looks good together. So we're just going to wire brush the top of it. So you're leaving yourself a nice clean surface. A lot of these little burrs and such, if you don't take your time and clean it, these things can end up on your kitchen floor, bathroom, in your clothes, in the washer. So you always want to make sure that you keep things clean as you're moving along. For an interior table like this, Typically a little bit harder wood like an oak, possibly even a maple would be nice to use. We're going to stick with the poplar. I like it. I will put a nice finish on the top so it'll protect it. And so I'm going to try to find some that have some good characteristic. This board keeps calling my name out. I don't know why. I like this little knot. It's funny what I look for. It just has a lot of character. I love this, you know. Just a really neat piece of wood. I do like these natural ends. It can make for a little bit of a not so perfect fit. I love this, so I need to find a strip to go down the middle. So we're going to use something else. Maybe I have some cherry or oak outside. I'm going to go check it out and I'll be right back. Put this right in between. We'll make it all sit flush here in a second, but you can kind of see how cool that looks with just the stripe down the middle. It's actually got a little bit more green on it too, so it looks pretty cool. So now we're going to sand these. Going to do a light little spray. Come back in a couple hours. This is Minwax, Helmsman's Minwax spar urethane. Looks really nice and clean. Best thing we could do here is let the rest of the table dry really well. After like 3 coats is really the way you want to go. Let each coat completely dry, which typically takes about 12 hours, maybe less depending on the weather. And then you would tape this off and put a nice finish onto the wood, which would be a roll-on of the version that we're using, the Hellman's, which is available in a quart, gallon, and spray. Thank you guys so much. It's pretty awesome. If you like what you see or want to leave any comments, do it below. Thanks again. We're going to do this next time. You tell me what you want and we'll make it happen. Let's go.